Part 4. Hey, it's Angela. Hi, and welcome back to Can You Believe It? We have finally completed this project of an interview, man. So welcome to 2 years later, my discovery of the very first interview. This is part 4. The very first interview with Quentin Tarantino, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Brad Pitt from Esquire magazine. I've got to say, this is one of the best interviews I have read. This has been a first read, first reaction with asides interview read. If you listen to this channel, you know that is what I do here at Hollywood Folklore. Okay, now at the end of part 3, I had told of my personal story in meeting beloved Brandon Lee, who we lost just beyond too soon in his life and ours. But this was my being able to meet him and introduced to him by a friend acquaintance of mine approximately 4 years before his demise. And if you want to hear that story, it is at the end of the previous part of this previous part to this. This is part 4. It is at the end of part 3. To catch us up on where we were in the article of the interview, I'm going to go ahead and reread Brad's, just one paragraph of his story of Brandon Lee. And then after that, Leo has a story involving River Phoenix. And then Quentin Tarantino has a story involving Kurt Cobain of Nirvana. So here we go. We left off with the stories of Brandon Lee, started by Brad Pitt, and then I added my story. And so we're going back to that paragraph just to refresh our memories. Brad Pitt, talking about how he hung out with Brandon Lee and had that stony night with him, because this is why I went ahead and shared my story of meeting Brandon Lee with you, and I think it will just refresh our memories as to where we were in the interview. So here goes. Brad Pitt. I remember back in the early days, I hung out with Brandon Lee. He drove a hearse and lived in Echo Park. We went out one night and everyone else had peeled off, and we ended up back at his place. It was like 6 a.m, a real, drunk and stony night. And he proceeded that night to tell me how he thought he was going to die young like his dad. And I just chalked it up to, stony 6 o'clock a.m. talk. Then he got the crow the next year. And his father, Bruce Lee, is depicted in the movie. Leonardo DiCaprio. I have one of the most ominous and sad ones. I grew up revering River Phoenix as the great actor of my generation. And all I ever wanted was to have just an opportunity to shake his hand. And one night, at a party in Silver Lake, I saw him walk up a flight of stairs. It was almost like something you would see in Vertigo, because I saw there was something in his face. And I'd never met him, always wanted to meet him, always wanted to just have an encounter with him. And he was walking toward me, and I kind of froze. And then the crowd got in my way, and I looked back, and he was gone. I walked back up the stairs and back down, and I was like, where did he go? And he was on his way to the Viper Room. It was almost as if, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know how to describe it, but it's this existential thing where I felt like he disappeared in front of my eyes, and the tragedy that I felt afterward of having lost this great influence for me and all of my friends, the actor we all talked about, just to be able to have that, always wanting to just, and I remember extending my hand out, and then two people came in front, and then I looked back, and then he wasn't there. Box parenth, pauses, period, end box parenth. I actually flew later to New Orleans to meet about Interview with the Vampire. To play the part Christian Slater ended up playing, box parenth, Phoenix had been cast in the role, period, end box parenth. Hi, this is Angela with another share. I am hearing this for the first time, and the way it strikes me is that I do think this was existential. I lived on Larrabee. That was the same street that the Viper Room was on. I lived above Sunset Boulevard. You crossed Sunset Boulevard, and on the west side of Larrabee was the Viper Room. And let me tell you why this strikes me as an existential experience for Leo. My dad told me this story once. My dad, when he was going to college, my dad, he went to war. He got out of war as an officer, and then he went to college on the GI Bill. He went to Cal Poly. In fact, he was recruited right off of the campus of Cal Poly by NASA. And he became an aerospace engineer for NASA. But at this time, he was going to Cal Poly. And he was sleeping. This one night, he said he just woke up. He just woke up, and he didn't know why, at 2 or 3 in the morning. And he said he looked in front of him, and sitting on the edge of his bed was in those days when a woman was going to travel, like to a train station, they wore pumps, a little suit, their hair, curled just so, and a hat. They carried a purse that matched their shoes, and then they wore their luggage with the round suitcase, and then the train case, and then possibly one other small overnight case. So my father looked and couldn't believe his eyes, but there was his sister, all dressed up in this traveling outfit with her luggage and her little gloves on, her hair done, and her little hat on. And she looked at him and she said, "Hello, Oliver." And he said, "Angela?" And she said, "Hi." And he said, "Hello, honey. What are you doing here?" And she said, "I'm going to be going on a trip. And I wanted to come by and say goodbye to you before I left." And I'm getting very cryable just telling you about this, because my father told me this. My father is no longer on this earth. And I never met my Aunt Angela. And this is so sweet that she loved him so much that in this transitional period in her life, she must have said to her angels, "Well, I want to go and say goodbye to my brother before I leave Earth." And this is why I believe that she was able to come and say goodbye to my dad. And my dad told me about this when I was just in my early 20s. And so I have known about this story for a while, quite a while. And I've shared it only with, I think, a couple of family members and maybe a couple of friends. So maybe only about 4 people in my whole life. So it's very special to me. And by friends, I mean someone that I was engaged to, and then my very, very, very best girlfriend. And so she told him what she had said about how she was taking a trip, but she wanted to come by and say goodbye to him before she left. And he said he didn't know. He thought he didn't know what I'm about to tell you. He said, well, can I take you there? I'll just get dressed and I'll take you to the station. And she said, no, honey, that's okay. I just wanted to come by and see you and tell you that I love you, Oliver. And I have to go now. And he blinked, and she was gone. Just disappeared right before him. Everything, suitcases, everything. He could not believe, she visited him. And he could not believe that he blinked and she was gone. And about 10 minutes after she left, he received a phone call from his brother saying to get dressed. He'd gotten a phone call from Angela, his sister, their sister, saying to come right away, that they had had an argument and it had turned into a physical fight and that things were bad. Please hurry. So John hung up the phone. He called his brother and he said, get dressed. I'm coming to pick you up and we're going over to Angela and her husband's house right now. And it was about 3 a.m. My dad got dressed. He waited for Uncle John, who picked him up about as soon as he could. He was there in a flash. And they sped over to their sister's house. They ran in, and what I'm about to tell you is very shocking. Angela had only been married to this man about a year or more. She was pregnant with their first child. They had a 2-story Victorian home with one of those grand staircases that is in the foyer as you enter the home. They burst in to find their sister lifeless. The man that she married was deceptively handsome and charming, but he had a very vicious side to him. He was associated with tough guys. This was in the 1930s in San Pedro, California. He had hit Angela on many, 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 several occasions. And she was always crying. They knew in their heart of hearts that she had been pushed down the stairs. They had believed that he did not want to be tied down to a wife and child. They felt that he had murdered her, and he had done so on purpose, and he had pushed her down the stairs. They knew him. They knew what they were talking about, and it was both of them. My dad had been a lifeguard in San Pedro. He had been a longshoreman, and he could stand his own ground, believe me. And his brother, his older brother, John, was the same way. They were strong men. That day, my dad says that they achieved justice for their sister. And I say, good for them, and I am proud of them for standing up for her when she could no longer stand up for herself. So when Leo says that seeing River Phoenix, he believed it was an existential experience, I believe him. I absolutely believe him. And he should believe that feeling that he has about it. Now back to the interview. Brad Pitt, I'll tell you one of the greatest moments I've had in these however many years we've been at it in this town, getting to spend 2 days with Burt Reynolds on this film. Quentin Tarantino, yeah. Leo DiCaprio, yeah. Michael Haney, he was originally cast to play George Span, correct? Quentin Tarantino, yeah. The last performance Burt Reynolds gave was when he came down and did a rehearsal day for the sequence, and then the script reading, and that was really amazing. Brad Pitt, it was an effing pleasure. Quentin Tarantino, I found out from 3 different people that the last thing he did just before he died was run lines with his assistant. Then he went to the bathroom, and that's when he had his heart attack. Brad Pitt, oh man. Michael Haney, Brad, what do you remember about those days with Burt? Brad Pitt, well, you gotta understand. For me, growing up in the Ozarks and watching Smokey the Bandit, you know, he was the guy. Virile, always had something sharp to say. Funny as S. A great dresser. Oh, man. Box parentheses, laughs. Period, and box parenthesis. And I had never met him, so being there with him reminded me of how much I enjoyed him as a kid. And then getting to spend those days with him in rehearsal, I was really touched by him. Leo DiCaprio, and for that matter, you know, Luke Perry. Box parenthesis. Perry plays Scott Lancer, another fictitious TV actor. Period, end box parenthesis. I remember my friend Vinny, who is in the film as well. We walked in and we both had this butterfly moment of like, comma quote, oh my God, that's Luke Perry over there, exclamation point, ending quotation mark. Brad Pitt, quote, that's Luke effing Perry, exclamation point, end quote. Brad continues, we were like kids in the candy shop because I remember going to the studios and box parenthesis Beverly Hills 90210 and box parenthesis was going on, and he was that icon of coolness for us as teenagers. It was this strange burst of excitement that I had to be able to act with him. Man, he was so incredibly humble and amazing and absolutely committed. He couldn't have been a more friendly, wonderful guy to spend time with. I got to sit down and have some wonderful conversations with him. It was really special. Quentin Tarantino. I went to the memorial, and 3 days earlier I had finished cutting together Luke's last scene. It's making me think grunge bands loved Reservoir Dogs. I think it was just a good tour bus movie. Kurt Cobain was this huge fan to such a degree that I'm thanked on the 3rd album. And I'd never met him. His people called me and said, comma quote, hey, would you like to get together with him? Question mark, end quote. And I go, comma, quote, I'd love to, but I'm in pre-production on Pulp Fiction, so maybe at some point afterward, period, end quote. But he never made it. Michael Haney. It reminds me, years ago I interviewed Sylvester Stallone, and in his library I see this little piece of paper framed on the wall. It was a letter that said something like, quote, "Dear Mr. Stallone, I want to congratulate you on your Academy Award nominations for Rocky. Signed, Charlie Chaplin." End quote. It turns out until Stallone was nominated for an Oscar for Best Screenplay and Best Actor for Rocky, only 2 other people had been nominated for an Academy Award for both writing and starring in a film: Orson Welles for Citizen Kane and Charlie Chaplin for The Great Director. Leo DiCaprio. No way. Brad Pitt. That's amazing. Michael Haney. This was in 1977. So I said, quote, "Did you meet him?" Question mark, end quote. And he said something like, comma, quote, "It was so stupid, comma, you know, period." I'm young and thinking, there's time for that. But 6 months later, he was dead. Period, end quote. Brad Pitt. Wow. Michael Haney. Stallone said it was one of the great regrets of his life, not grabbing that moment. Leo DiCaprio. You seem to be able to put a nice ending and answer on a lot of things we want to say, too. Michael Haney. But isn't that part of what the film is about? Making the most of the time and being grateful? Because you never know what's going to change in your life. Leo DiCaprio. Absolutely. And that, folks, is the conclusion of Esquire Magazine's Quentin Tarantino, Brad Pitt, and Leonardo DiCaprio take you inside Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and I really did. Oh, by the way, here's something. I would call this maybe not an aside, but certainly an extra. And I would title it, What Brad Pitt and I, Angela Arden, Have in Common. Because we do, you know. Okay, I found during this interview that Brad Pitt and I have 3 things in common. Well, 2 I found in this interview, and 1 I kind of already knew. So here they are. 1, Brad Pitt and I possibly played pool together at the same time at Barney's Beanery on, I believe it is Holloway Drive, just above Santa Monica Boulevard, and then it goes back down into Santa Monica Boulevard in Hollywood, California, on their pool table. Now, I can't confirm this. I don't know who he was at the time. He doesn't know who I am still to this day. However, we both did play pool at Barney's Beanery. So, perhaps it was on the same night, at the same time. Could be. Here's the thing. It just might have happened. So that is mine because it cannot be proved wrong. Not at this time or in any other. So I'm going to take that and run with it. And now on to number 2, which is simply that there was a brief period in my life when I, through the agency again, when I worked for Jerry Weintraub. And he had a place on Wilshire Boulevard in Beverly Hills, across from the Beverly Hills Cafe, where he used to have his roundtable meetings in the morning. In fact, I have a lot of stories about a lot of stars that I got to meet while I worked there, and perhaps I will share that with you in the future. But right now, I just wanted to let you know that Jerry Weintraub produced Ocean's 11 and their following sequels, which, as we all know, starred George Clooney and Brad Pitt, as well as Matt Damon, and Julia Roberts was in one. Hey, it was an all-star cast each and every time of about, maybe 25 people, 30 people, each and every film. Jerry made a cameo in each of those films. Jerry Weintraub, just to give you one little fact, he was the very first person to ever be Marilyn Monroe's manager in Hollywood way back in the day. Jerry Weintraub was always nice to me. I liked him very much, and I miss him. And of course, our third connection between myself and the illustrious Brad Pitt is one that is, of course, melancholy, which is that Brad and I both got to meet Brandon Lee. And, of course, Brad Pitt went on to know him. At least he spent an evening with him where they went out and had a drink or two. And although I only got to meet him, what a very special experience that was. And I was so glad that I was able to share that with you in this. It's either in the last episode or this episode, because this ran long and I divided it into 2. But I think it's in part 4. So those are the 3 1 degree of separation connections between Brad Pitt and myself. Well, gosh, this was awfully fun. Let's do this again sometime real soon, okay? I'll see you in the next post, and until then, you go out and be the star of your own life. This is Angela Arden. Bye for now. Bye.